I never thought I'd be the type of person to end up in a neighborhood feud, especially not one involving the homeowners association. But here I am. My name is Daniel Carter, a systems engineer who works remotely. I keep to myself, maintain my yard, and generally try to be a good neighbor. My house is in Maplewood Heights, a charming suburb with well-kept homes, friendly residents, and unfortunately, an overbearing HOA board with far too much authority. When I bought my home 3 years ago, it was perfect. The previous owners had converted the garage into a home office with large windows, making it an ideal workspace. There was still enough room for one car inside, plus a detached carport in the back for another. It was a setup that worked perfectly until Linda Caldwell moved in next door and, within 6 months, managed to get herself elected as HOA president. Linda, or Lindy, as she insisted everyone call her, was in her mid-50s with a severe blonde bob that somehow got sharper every time I saw her. She drove a pristine white Lexus SUV with a custom license plate that read Lindy Rules. Every time I saw it, I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes. At first, our interactions were minor annoyances. She complained about the succulents on my front porch, claiming they weren't HOA-approved vegetation. Fine, I moved them to the backyard. Then she took issue with my garbage bins being visible from the street for too long on collection day. I adjusted my schedule. But with Linda, there was always something. The color of my mailbox, the placement of my security cameras, the delivery packages that sat on my porch while I was in meetings. Each violation led to a printed notice in my mailbox, a text message, and occasionally, an in-person visit. Linda had a way of standing just a little too close, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Daniel, honey, we all have to follow the same rules. It's what keeps our property values high. You understand, don't you? I'm just doing my job as president. I kept my composure and addressed each issue as quickly and quietly as possible, hoping she'd move on. But then came the carport incident. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was on an important video call when I heard a car horn blaring incessantly from my driveway. I tried to ignore it, but after 5 minutes, I had to excuse myself. Stepping outside with an umbrella, I found Linda sitting in her Lexus, repeatedly pressing the horn while glaring at me through the windshield. She rolled down her window just enough to speak without letting the rain in. Daniel, you need to move your car. I've been sitting out here getting wet. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what? The street is flooded near my driveway, and I didn't want to risk water damage to my car. Your carport was empty, so I assumed you wouldn't mind. I looked over. My car was in the garage because I'd been unloading groceries when the rain started. The carport was temporarily vacant, but that didn't make it public parking. Linda, this is my property. You can't just park here without asking. She scoffed. Well, I'm asking now. Just move your car out of the garage so I can pull in there instead. The rain is blowing into the carport. Her audacity left me momentarily speechless. No, Linda, I'm not moving my car. She huffed, but eventually drove away, her tires kicking up water as she went. I thought that was the end of it, but I underestimated Linda's persistence. A few days later, I came home to find my garage door open. Confused, I checked the security footage. Sure enough, Linda had used a spare key from the HOA's emergency lockbox to let herself in. Furious, I changed the garage code, installed a smart lock, and upgraded my security cameras. When Linda found out, she was livid. She marched up to my door, banging aggressively. Daniel, this is unacceptable. That garage has to remain accessible to the HOA for emergencies. Linda, you're not an emergency. You had no right to enter my property. I was just checking on things. Don't do it again. The next day, I received a formal HOA violation notice stating that my garage modifications were against the rules. I knew this was retaliation, so I consulted a legal expert and the police. Armed with evidence from my security cameras, I filed a trespassing complaint. At the next HOA meeting, I presented my case. Residents were shocked to learn that Linda had used her position to access private property. The backlash was immediate. Calls for her resignation grew, and within weeks, she was voted out as HOA president. Linda tried to downplay everything, but her reputation was ruined. Eventually, she put her house up for sale and moved. Maplewood Heights breathed a collective sigh of relief. As for me, my garage remains locked, my carport is strictly off-limits, and my security system is better than ever. I may not have wanted this fight, but I sure as hell won it. I refuse to move my car. This is my property, and I need you to leave now. Linda glared at me for a solid 30 seconds before finally shifting into reverse. I'll be speaking to the board about this. There should be emergency provisions for these situations. You're being very unreasonable, Daniel. As she backed out, she deliberately drove through a puddle, splashing muddy water onto my shoes and pants. That evening, I received an email from the HOA with the subject line, "Proposed Amendment for Community Emergency Vehicle Accommodations," which would require residents with excess parking accommodations to make them available to neighbors during emergency weather events. Linda was listed as the contact person. I forwarded the email to a legal consultant who confirmed what I already suspected: they couldn't force me to allow others to park on my property. With their guidance, I drafted a firm response to the entire board, not just Linda, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following weekend, I returned home from grocery shopping to find a white Lexus SUV parked in my garage, my actual garage, not the driveway. The door was open, the vehicle was inside, and Linda was nowhere to be seen. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. How had she gotten inside? Then I remembered, during a previous HOA inspection, Linda had requested access to check some wiring that was supposedly visible from outside. Since I was told it was a routine inspection, I had given the HOA office access to my spare key for the garage. I never thought Linda would steal it for her own use. A note was taped to the interior garage door. "Daniel, had to attend an emergency board meeting. My driveway is being resealed today, and I couldn't park on the street because of the construction on Elmwood. Used your garage since you were out. Thanks for understanding. Linda." I stood there, note in hand, unable to believe the level of entitlement. She had entered my property without permission, used the HOA's access to my key, and left her car in my garage as if we had some prior arrangement. Without hesitation, I shut the garage door, went inside, and immediately took action. First, I removed my spare key from the HOA's possession, ensuring Linda, or anyone else, would never have unauthorized access again. Next, I installed a smart lock system that required my fingerprint or a mobile app to unlock. Lastly, I disabled the manual garage door override and set up security cameras both inside and outside. Then, I texted Linda a simple message. "I see you've parked in my garage without permission. The locks have been changed. Please contact me when you return so we can discuss this breach of privacy." 3 hours later. "Linda, Daniel, I need to get my car. Please open the garage." I waited 15 minutes before responding. "Me, I'm in a meeting. I'll be available in an hour. In the future, please don't enter my property or use my garage without explicit permission." 10 minutes later, my doorbell started ringing. I checked the security camera to see Linda standing there, repeatedly pressing the button while talking animatedly on her phone. I decided to let her wait a bit longer. When I finally opened the door 30 minutes later, she had worked herself into a state of righteous indignation. Her face was flushed, and she had been pacing on my porch for so long that there were visible tracks in the welcome mat. "This is completely unacceptable," she burst out before I could even speak. "I have been waiting for almost an hour. I have an important appointment, and you've essentially held my vehicle hostage. I could call the police for this." I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression calm. "For what exactly? You entered my property without permission, used a key that was never meant for personal use, and left your vehicle in my private garage without consent. If anyone should be considering calling the authorities, it would be me." "It was an emergency," Linda huffed. "My driveway is being resealed." "That's not an emergency, Linda. That's scheduled maintenance that you knew about in advance and failed to plan for. You could have asked a friend to drop you off at your meeting or called a ride-sharing service. Just open the garage now. I'm already late." I shook my head. We need to be clear about boundaries first. By this point, several neighbors had started watching from their porches, whispering amongst themselves. Linda's frustration grew when she noticed them. "I am the HOA president, Daniel. You should be cooperating with the community." "No, Linda. You are abusing your position to trespass on private property. And judging by how everyone is looking at you right now, I think the community is starting to see it too." Her face paled slightly, but she stood her ground. "I will take this to the board." "Please do. In fact, I've already contacted a legal consultant and filed a complaint with the police about unauthorized entry. If you keep escalating this, I'll be happy to press charges." Silence. Then, she crossed her arms. Just give me my damn car. I walked to the garage, unlocked the door under my terms, and watched as Linda stormed in, started her Lexus, and peeled out of my driveway, leaving behind a spectacle for the entire neighborhood. The fallout was immediate. News of Linda's stunt spread like wildfire. Other homeowners who had been quietly enduring her overreach finally spoke up. At the next HOA meeting, multiple residents demanded her resignation. By the end of the month, she had been removed from her position and replaced with someone far more reasonable. As for me, I kept my smart locks, my cameras, and my distance from Linda Caldwell. But I did take some satisfaction in watching her for sale sign go up a few weeks later. Good riddance. Do you understand that what you did was inappropriate and a violation of my privacy? Daniel asked firmly, crossing his arms. Linda Caldwell, the authoritarian HOA president, glared at him, her arms folded tightly. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Neighbors help each other all the time. Help that is requested and agreed upon, yes. Not help that is taken without permission. I need you to acknowledge that you overstepped before I opened that garage. Linda's face turned an alarming shade of red, and for a moment, Daniel thought she might explode. For a woman used to controlling everything in Maplewood Heights, being held accountable was clearly a new and unwelcome experience. Fine, she finally hissed through clenched teeth. I should have asked before using your garage. Now, will you please open it? It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was probably the best he was going to get. Daniel nodded and reached for his phone to activate the garage door. And I'll need you to delete the old code from your phone. It won't work anymore, but I want to be sure you don't have it. With clear reluctance, Linda pulled out her phone, opened her Notes app, and deleted something while showing him the screen. Satisfied, Daniel pressed a button on his phone, and the garage door began to lift. Linda stormed past him without another word, climbed into her Lexus, and backed out of the driveway far faster than was safe for a residential street. Her tires squealed slightly as she took the corner. Daniel exhaled, thinking that would be the end of it. The next morning, however, he found an official-looking notice from the HOA taped to his front door. According to the document, his home office conversion was non-compliant with HOA regulations and had to be restored to its original garage function within 30 days. It was a direct attack. The previous owners had obtained all necessary permits for the conversion, and Daniel had the documentation to prove it. In the 3 years he had lived there, the HOA had never raised an issue about it. Linda was clearly retaliating. Daniel contacted a legal consultant who confirmed his suspicions. The HOA couldn't retroactively enforce a rule against a properly permitted conversion. She helped draft a firm response letter citing legal precedents and subtly hinting at potential legal action if the harassment continued. That evening, Daniel was still pondering his next move when he heard a car pull into his driveway. Checking his security camera, he was stunned to see Linda's white Lexus pulling into his garage. The door had been opened because he had been bringing in yard tools earlier and hadn't yet closed it. He watched in disbelief as Linda parked, exited the vehicle, and walked away toward what he presumed was another HOA meeting. This time, there wasn't even a note, just the blatant assumption that his garage was hers to use whenever she pleased. A calm determination settled over Daniel. If she wanted to play games, he could play too, but he would ensure he stayed within legal boundaries. He closed the garage door remotely with his app and drove to the hardware store. An hour later, he returned with a heavy-duty padlock and hasp. He installed the hasp on the interior of the garage door, ensuring it couldn't be opened from the outside regardless of any access code. He double-checked that the installation was secure but didn't damage the door itself. Then, he settled into his living room with a book and a cup of tea, positioning himself where he could see the street through the window. About 2 hours later, Linda returned. He watched as she approached the garage, pressed the keypad code. Apparently, she had memorized the old one despite deleting it from her phone, and then frowned when nothing happened. She tried again, then pulled out her phone, presumably to check if she had the right code. After a few more failed attempts, she walked to Daniel's front door and rang the bell. Daniel took his time answering. He counted slowly to 30 before opening the door with a look of mild surprise. "Linda, what can I do for you?" Linda's artificial smile was strained. "The garage door seems to be malfunctioning. I need to get my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Your car? In my garage? Again? Without asking?" After our conversation yesterday. Her smile faltered slightly. I was in a hurry, and you weren't home. I assumed it would be fine since the door was open. It's just for a few hours. It's not fine, Linda. We literally just had this conversation about boundaries and respect for private property. You're trespassing, and you've once again taken something without permission. Look, I don't have time for this. Just open the garage. The board meeting ran long, and I need to get home. I remained calm. I've installed a manual lock on the inside of the door. For security purposes, you understand. After finding unauthorized people entering my garage, I felt it was necessary. Her eyes widened. You locked my car in your garage? That's illegal. You can't hold my property hostage. I secured my own property after repeated invasions of privacy. I corrected. Your unauthorized parking doesn't give you any rights here. But don't worry. I'll be happy to open it tomorrow morning. Around 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning? She nearly shrieked. That's outrageous. I need my car now, and I needed you to respect my property and privacy. But we don't always get what we need, do we? I kept my voice even. You've left me notices, filed complaints, tried to create new HOA rules targeting me specifically, and repeatedly entered my property without permission. Consider this a natural consequence of your actions. I'll call the police, she threatened, pulling out her phone. Feel free, I replied with a shrug. I have security camera footage of you entering my garage without permission, documentation of our previous conversation where you acknowledged doing the same thing was inappropriate, and a lawyer on retainer who will be fascinated to hear about the pattern of harassment you've been engaging in. I'm sure the officers will be very interested in all of that. She stared at me, phone in hand, clearly calculating whether this was a bluff. After a tense moment, she lowered the phone. This isn't over, she said in a low voice. The board will hear about this. I'm sure they will, along with my lawyer, and possibly the local news if necessary. I've documented everything, Linda. Every notice, every text, every security footage clip of you entering my property without permission. If you want to escalate this, I'm prepared. Something in my tone must have conveyed my seriousness, because her expression shifted slightly from anger to uncertainty. She huffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off down the street, presumably to call someone for a ride. Understood. The next morning, I woke early and prepared for what would likely be another confrontational encounter. At exactly 9 a.m., I heard a car pull up outside. Looking through the window, I saw not just Linda but also two other people I recognized from HOA board meetings. Howard Johnson, an older gentleman who had always seemed reasonable, and Diane Miller, a newer resident who had recently joined the board. Linda had brought reinforcements. I took a deep breath, unlocked the interior smart lock, and went to open the front door. The group was already approaching, with Linda in the lead, looking grim and determined. Good morning, I said pleasantly. Right on time, I see. Linda didn't return the greeting. These are board members who have come to witness the situation and ensure there are no further misunderstandings. I nodded. Excellent. More witnesses are always helpful when documenting inappropriate behavior. I've already activated the garage door. Feel free to collect your illegally parked vehicle. The garage door was indeed opening behind them. Howard and Diane looked uncomfortable, glancing between Linda and me as if trying to gauge what exactly they had been dragged into. Howard stepped forward with an apologetic smile. Daniel, Linda has shared some concerns about ongoing disputes. Perhaps we could sit down and discuss this like neighbors? I'm always open to reasonable discussion, I replied. But just so everyone's clear on what we're discussing, Linda has repeatedly trespassed on my property, used a spare key from HOA management to access my private garage without my consent, and has even attempted to create HOA rules specifically targeting me. Howard frowned slightly, turning to Linda. Is this true? Linda crossed her arms defensively. He's exaggerating. I just needed a place to park briefly, and I was planning to return the key. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that happened multiple times. I asked, arching an eyebrow, and resulted in multiple complaints, harassment, and targeted HOA violations filed against me. Diane looked at Linda with new skepticism. Linda, did you really use an HOA key to get into Daniel's garage? Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. It's not like that. Howard sighed. Linda, I don't think this is something the board should be involved in. This sounds more like a personal issue that has escalated. I smiled slightly. I agree. But since I now have documented proof of Linda's repeated trespassing, harassment, and unauthorized access, I'll be moving forward with legal action if this continues. Linda turned pale. Legal action? Yes. My legal advisor has already been consulted, and if any further violations occur, I will be pressing charges for trespassing and harassment. Diane and Howard exchanged glances, clearly realizing how serious this had become. Diane finally spoke. Linda, I think it's best if you step back from this. Howard nodded. I agree. This isn't something the HOA should be involved in, and frankly, it doesn't reflect well on the board. Linda's face turned red. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then thought better of it. With a final glare in my direction, she huffed, got into her car, and sped off without another word. A few days later, an official notice was sent out to the entire neighborhood. Linda Caldwell had officially resigned as HOA president due to personal reasons. The new board leadership implemented stricter rules on HOA key management, ensuring that no single board member could access private property without explicit consent from homeowners. As I read the notice, I couldn't help but smile. The battle was finally over. Linda Caldwell entered my property without permission, used my private garage without consent, and when confronted, filed retaliatory complaints. Now, she is attempting to use her authority as HOA president to continue this harassment. I have documentation of all of this, which my legal counsel and the police are reviewing. Howard's eyebrows shot up as he turned to Linda. You parked in his garage without permission? More than once. Linda waved a dismissive hand. It was an emergency situation. He's blowing it out of proportion and retaliating by locking my car inside. Actually, I interjected. I secured my own property after repeated unauthorized entry. The fact that she once again parked there without permission is her responsibility, not mine. Diane looked troubled. Linda, you told us Daniel had agreed to let you park there temporarily and then maliciously locked your car inside. That doesn't seem to match what I'm hearing. Linda's face flushed. He's twisting the situation. I left him a note the first time. A note is not permission, I pointed out. And there wasn't even a note this time. Just a blatant assumption that my property was available for her use. Howard cleared his throat. Linda, why don't you get your car, and then perhaps we should continue this discussion at the community center rather than in Daniel's driveway? Linda looked like she wanted to argue, but instead, she stomped to her now accessible vehicle, got in, and slammed the door with unnecessary force. As she backed out, she nearly hit Diane, who had to step quickly aside. That afternoon, I returned from a quick grocery run to find Linda's Lexus once again parked in my driveway. Not in the garage this time, but blocking access to it completely. This was beyond petty. This was deliberate harassment. I took photos from multiple angles, documenting the time and date, then called the non-emergency police line to report a vehicle blocking my driveway. While waiting for an officer to arrive, I also contacted a towing company. Officer Jenkins arrived about 20 minutes later and listened carefully as I explained the situation. I showed him security footage of previous incidents and documentation of Linda's pattern of behavior. So, she's parked here to block your access deliberately after being told multiple times not to park on your property, he clarified. That's correct, I confirmed. This appears to be escalating retaliation for me securing my garage to prevent unauthorized use. He nodded, making notes. I'll document this and speak with the vehicle owner. Officer Jenkins went to Linda's door while I waited by my car. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Linda's animated gestures through her storm door. The discussion lasted about 10 minutes before the officer returned to me. She claims there's been a misunderstanding about shared parking arrangements in the neighborhood, he said, his tone suggesting he didn't find this particularly convincing. I've advised her to move her vehicle immediately and to refrain from parking on your property without explicit written permission in the future. I've also documented this incident, which should help if you need to establish a pattern of behavior. If the vehicle isn't moved within 15 minutes, you're within your rights to have it towed from your private property, he added. I've made that clear to her as well. Linda emerged from her house 5 minutes later, shot me a venomous glare, and stomped to her Lexus. She backed out with her usual disregard for safety and sped away. The next day, I received an official-looking envelope in my mailbox. It contained a notice of an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for the following evening, with parking violations and property use restrictions listed as the primary agenda item. Linda's signature was at the bottom. I attended the meeting with my legal advisor. When Linda saw us enter, her expression was a mixture of surprise, anger, and uncertainty. She presented a narrative about community standards and certain residents who were hostile to neighborhood cooperation. I distributed documentation showing her repeated trespassing and retaliatory actions. To Linda's visible dismay, many other residents had stories of their own: selective enforcement of rules, unprofessional interactions, retaliatory notices after disagreements. What had started as Linda's attempt to rally community support against me was rapidly becoming a referendum on her conduct as a board member. "This meeting is about parking violations, not personal grievances," she insisted, her voice higher than usual. "Actually," Howard interjected, "this meeting is about community concerns, which clearly extend beyond parking." The meeting concluded with plans to review HOA governance procedures. Linda was later removed from the board at the next official meeting, and Howard was elected as the new HOA president, bringing a more collaborative approach to neighborhood governance. 3 weeks later, Linda listed her house for sale. The day she moved out, our eyes met briefly across the street. I raised my hand in a small wave, acknowledging our shared history. She gave a tight nod before driving away in her Lexus, still with the personalized license plate that had become infamous in Maplewood Heights. I never saw Linda Caldwell again, but her legacy lived on in a more balanced HOA and a neighborhood that had come together against petty tyranny. As for my garage, I removed the additional padlock but kept the security cameras. Some lessons are worth remembering, even after the teacher is gone. Linda's visible dismay only grew as other residents began sharing their own experiences: selective rule enforcement, unprofessional behavior, and retaliatory notices issued after disagreements. What had started as Linda's attempt to rally community support against me was rapidly turning into an open forum on her misconduct as HOA president. "This meeting is about parking violations, not personal grievances," she insisted, her voice sharper than usual. "Actually," Howard interjected, "this meeting is about community concerns, which clearly go beyond parking." By the end of the discussion, the board agreed to review HOA governance procedures, ensuring greater transparency. At the next official meeting, Linda was overwhelmingly voted out of her position, with Howard elected as the new board president. His leadership brought a more collaborative and fair approach to neighborhood management. 3 weeks later, Linda listed her house for sale. The day she moved out, our eyes met briefly across the street. I raised my hand in a small wave, acknowledging our shared history. She gave a tight nod before driving away in her Lexus, still with the custom license plate that had once symbolized her authority. I never saw Linda Caldwell again, but her legacy remained. Maplewood Heights had come together to stand against petty tyranny. As for my private garage, I removed the extra locks but kept the security cameras. Some lessons are worth remembering, even after the teacher is gone. Standing firm, the power of boundaries and accountability. In life, we often encounter people who test our boundaries, whether through entitlement, manipulation, or sheer disregard for respect. Daniel Carter's experience with Linda Caldwell is a powerful reminder that standing firm, documenting wrongs, and responding with calm determination can turn the tide against injustice. One key lesson is the importance of setting and enforcing personal boundaries. Daniel didn't let frustration cloud his judgment. Instead, he took deliberate, legal steps to protect his property and dignity. Too often, people hesitate to stand up for themselves, fearing confrontation. But as Daniel showed, asserting your rights isn't about aggression. It's about self-respect. Another lesson is the value of patience and preparation. Instead of reacting emotionally, Daniel gathered evidence, involved the right authorities, and allowed the truth to expose misconduct. In the end, his persistence not only resolved his own problem but also improved the entire community, proving that holding people accountable can lead to lasting change. For older adults who may face challenges like unfair treatment, pushy neighbors, or even family disputes, this story is a testament to the power of quiet strength. Respect is earned, but boundaries must be defended, and when done wisely, justice prevails.